Oh, hello, and welcome to season 2 of Refill with Preach Sista. I am your host, Michelle, and as you know, twice a month, I invite a guest to join me in studio for a conversation that inspires us to deepen our faith and care for our souls. This season, our conversations are focused on lessons that we have learned from major life events and on what these events have taught us about life, faith, and ourselves. So, if you're looking for a little inspiration or if your spiritual cup is less than full and you need a refill, you're in the right place to refill with Preach Sista. And now, let's get on to our show. So, I'm wondering if you all noticed, here we go. I'm wondering if you all noticed here. You can tell we are absolutely live because we are having all kinds of wonderful plans here. Here we go. There we go. I found myself. You can tell we are still live and still working out. You know, it's been a couple of months since we have done a show, but that's okay. But I'm wondering if you noticed the little sneak peek that we have about our big announcement. And our big announcement is this, drum roll, please. Here we go. The Antioch podcast is now a ministry of Preach Sista. This summer, we acquired the Antioch podcast. And our guest for today is the producer of the Antioch podcast, Mr. Eric Nykamp, and I'm super excited. This is a first in so many ways for us for the Refill with Preach Sista. And I'm sure Eric won't mind me saying this, but Eric is the first male guest we have had on Refill with Preach Sista, and I'm so excited that that is the case. Because what this means is that God has been doing a work on us, and we say, you know, everyone is welcome to the table at Refill with Preach Sista, but realizing that, yeah, I need to dig a little bit deeper into my friend list, a little bit wider into my friend list, and invite some more people to the show. So today, our guest is none other than the producer of the Antioch podcast. And so, Mr. Eric Nykamp, would you please just briefly introduce yourself?
Sure. Well, a lot of times I do tell people that I am the producer of the Antioch podcast. I also wear a few other hats. So I'm a husband, I'm a dad, I am employed as a therapist, and I'm also a worship leader and visual artist. So I do dabble with a number of different things.
Oh, that is so cool. And you know, our relationship goes back before the Antioch podcast, but I'm so glad that our paths are crossed and that we have been, on this journey, right? And there's still more to come, more things that we have, that we're waiting to see what God is actually going to be doing as we continue to move forward. There's, you know, this partnership between, Preach Sista and the Antioch podcast, at least was an answer to the prayers that we've had here at Preach Sista, because we wanted to be more involved in the conversation surrounding social justice. But, you know, there's only so many hours in a day. How am I going to fit this in? And as it so happened, as God so orchestrated, the Antioch podcast was available for acquisition. And since I was already on the team as part of the conversationalist, is that a word? Part of the panel, we just made an offer. And so we're grateful for Madison Square to say, yes, you can do that. We're grateful for that because it shows that they trust the ministry of Preach Sista. So we are super excited in this partnership. Woo! So with all of that, I don't want to delay. I want to jump into this conversation because for season 2, we're really looking into major life events and how they have shaped our lives, how they help us to be the people that we are. So Eric, I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind answering this question. What has been a major moment in your life that has shaped the person that you are today?
Yeah, this was pretty easy to answer for me. It was an event that happened over and over and over in my life from the age of 5 to when I was about 16. And I grew up in a very small white rural community. And as a little boy at that time who was really artistic, I didn't fit in well to my community. And I regularly was beat up by a number of different people at school. And being a small school in a rural community, you don't get to go to a different school or get in a different class. You are just with the people who hurt you.
Mm-hmm.
And, that was about 10, 11, 12 years of my life where you couldn't escape what people thought of you and what they could do to you. And how that shaped me is that it made me really aware of injustice, and that sometimes you don't get to control how other people perceive you, what they think about you, or what they can do to you.
Mm-hmm.
And in many ways, that set me on a path for the rest of my life.
Wow. Wow. What I appreciate about your story is one, the contextualization of it, right? So it's like in a small school, everybody knows you, you can't escape it. Um, and then yet you're trying to survive within that context, and how you took the pain of those moments to really become an advocate for social justice, right? And that ties in so well with what we do on the Antioch podcast, because with the Antioch podcast, it's conversations on biblical anti-racism. So we're talking about justice, particularly around the areas of race, but oftentimes we go into other areas of marginalization or marginalized identities. And so it's really great to hear how this connection and how those moments in your life help to shape the person who you are today. So as you're thinking about those moments, and those moments are really some painful moments, thank you for sharing them with us. I'm wondering, what lessons did you learn, or do you continue to learn, about yourself, about life, and about your faith?
From a faith perspective, that idea that God is near to the brokenhearted,
Mm.
and there are a lot of people who are brokenhearted in the world. Probably everybody at some point in their life is brokenhearted. Sometimes there are systemic reasons that a person is brokenhearted. And
So Eric, when you say systemic reason, for people who might not be regular listeners
yeah,
of the
yeah.
podcast, what do you mean? What's an example of a systemic reason that someone might be brokenhearted?
Well, if society or if the legal system views you in a certain light, they're going to respond to you according to those rules that are kind of in
Mm,
people's minds or that are
okay.
literally written to laws. And so, people can be marginalized. I remember around the same time that I was getting beaten up regularly, that my mother wanted to do some work in the school as a teacher,
Mm-hmm.
and was regularly told by the all male school board that she couldn't do things that she wanted to do. And the reasons were very fuzzy and never well defined. And I
Ah,
remember listening to these stories at dinner and realizing that people aren't letting my mom have a say so in things because she's a woman.
okay. Yes. Yeah, that's a good
And there's
example.
no and there's nothing she can do about that. She doesn't get
Yeah.
to show up in a different body.
Mm-hmm. We have a sensitivity to that here at Preach Sista because so many of the women who find themselves sensing a call from God to be in ministry, whether it is proclaiming the gospel, assisting in the church in some ways, or assisting in a parachurch, or even starting a parachurch ministry, sometimes run into those roadblocks. Well, you can't, and the kindness is if the reason is given up front. You can't because you're a woman, right? It's not fair. Don't like it, but at least I know. It's just that fuzziness is like, really? That's a reason?
And it always
um,
kind of shifts a little bit, like
yeah, it's
when you're
always,
like, oh, I'll work on that. Oh, and
yeah,
then it becomes something else. And then it's
yes.
always something else.
It's always something else. That's when it becomes like, okay, there's something else going in here, but you can't quite put your finger on it. Yeah, that's such a great illustration of what we mean by systemic, right? What are some systemic things that can be that you're involved in that you don't know it's surrounding you but has an impact on your life? So becoming aware of some of the systemic problems that are in the world, and also how that can show up in faith. Are there any other things that you learned about yourself and or your faith as well as life?
I'd say that it was probably a major motivation for me to become a therapist.
Ah, okay.
Originally, when I was a kid, I thought I want to be a pastor.
Okay.
That was my big goal. But it turned out that I had a learning disability. And so the part of pastoring that I wanted to do the most was to sit in an office with somebody and talk to them about
Mm-hmm.
their journey. And I get to do that now in a professional capacity as a therapist instead.
Okay. Wow. Wow, that's just saying the thing that disqualified you for something else didn't become a hindrance for something else. And actually, you're a good therapist, so you're a very good person to talk to. So God knew what was up. Eric, can you imagine if you were a pastor at this time? Um, or had been a pastor, the last 10 years, we'll be generous. If you'd been a pastor the last 10 years, you would probably, I don't know if you'd still be pastoring, honestly, if you had gone through the last 10 years.
Yeah. And there's a lot of things that in my own faith journey, like I've changed my opinions about a lot of things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That the last few years, the last 18 months really have, I think, called. Well, let me rephrase this. I hope the last 18 months have been an opportunity for followers of Christ to really examine their faith and really examine what does it mean to be Christian, because the world is watching, and not only is the world watching, but God is watching. What does it mean to be a follower of Christ, and who is describing what it means to be a Christian? Are we describing what it means to be a Christian? Are we telling society what it means to be a Christian? Or are there other people? Is society telling us what does it mean to be a Christian? Because I think we're leaning more into society is telling us what does it mean to be a Christian. And some of what I'm hearing about what it means to be a Christian doesn't line up with the way that I live out my life. It doesn't line up with the values and the principles that are important to me. And so I think this is, we have a little bit more time. We haven't been locked down again, but we're at the time of this recording. We are in September of 2021, and depending on which state you're in, you're either masking or not masking. But here in the state of Michigan, right, masking is a thing, and so we're trying hard not to impose more restrictions. But I have a feeling that more of those restrictions will be coming if we can't slow down the spread of the Delta variant of the coronavirus. So. I think we'll have a bit more time to really be reflective on what does this mean. I've heard it said we should never waste a crisis. And in this crisis, one of the things that we have an opportunity to do, where we have an opportunity to grow, we have an opportunity for introspection, to really look at, what's going on in my life? What is my faith life like? What do I value about gathering with other people in a worshiping community? What don't I miss about gathering together with people in a worshiping community? Kind of like weighing, it's virtual church or it's in-person church, and what do we value, along with what are the values that I want to see in a church? What are the characteristics that I want to see in a church? And giving us some time to look for that. So, that is amazing. Got good stuff going on. So, with all that is going on, I'm going to shift the conversation just a little bit, and I'm going to tap into the Eric with his therapist hat on. When you're talking with people, either in a professional capacity or just in a friend capacity, or the good Samaritan, good neighbor, good stranger capacity, and someone is expressing that they're feeling overwhelmed, they're feeling stressed, or they're feeling like they're just running low on energy, what are ways that you might encourage them to seek out to do, or some things to do to refill their tanks? After all, this is Refill with Preach Sista.
Yeah.
We're talking about how do we refill our spiritual, emotional tanks when we're feeling like we're running low. Hopefully not running on fumes yet, but just feeling like, oh, we're down about a quarter of a tank. Oh, we're down about half a tank. We need to refill. We need to top this off. What are some things that quickly come to mind to you that you would offer to someone, or even something that's worked for you?
So I use the metaphor of a chair quite often with people. When people come in to my office and talk about feeling overwhelmed, I'll have them imagine a chair. Wooden chairs are these things that you can put your full body weight in, you can lean back, and they don't give.
Hmm.
And it's the piece of furniture in your house probably that's going to last the longest. And when I imagine a support system for someone, I'm like, think of a chair, and a chair has four legs. If you have four people in your life that you are in reciprocal relationship with, meaning that you give as much as you take, if you have four people, like research shows that you can go through life storms and weather those storms.
Oh, wow.
When people don't have four people in their life, and I'm finding lots of folks that are coming into my office that don't, and COVID has really really made that clear, because we're spending so much time alone, and most of us cope with life by staying busy. But when we have lots of alone time and realize, like, wow, I don't have these relationships in my life, this give and take relationships that can nurture my spirit, that's something to invest in. So I guess my first thing would be go find your people. And if you
Ah,
don't have people, make it a task to start finding people. And it takes a while.
yeah. I love that advice. Go find your people. And I would put emphasis on your people. And your people doesn't necessarily mean people that look like you. Your people are just people who can support you, as like the chair analogy, that can really support you. That your people are people that get you. Your people are people that can hear you out. Your people can pull you back from the ledge, and say, "Hey, I'm noticing this. Hey, slow it down. Hey, we need to talk. We need to talk." So yeah, I really like that. Yeah, and if you don't have those people in your life, you need to find where your people are.
Yeah. And I think most of us need reassurance from time to
Mm,
time. Most people need to hear another person in their life tell them, you're not crazy. You're normal. Everybody feels this. I went through it. You're going to get through it. These pieces of advice, like, even though
mm-hmm.
they're very common, you can't say it to yourself. You need somebody to say it to you, and to, like, look at you in the eye, and lean forward
Mm-hmm.
and, maybe give you a hug. But without those people in your life to tell you that you are not crazy,
Yeah.
you feel crazy.
Wow. Wow. I really hadn't thought about the importance of having someone else tell you that, right? Because I guess I think more about the importance of us telling ourselves that. Like, I often will give someone some affirmations, right? Say, hey, say this, say this to yourself. Look in the mirror, hold your head up because your crown is slipping. So hold your head up, look in the mirror. I don't care if you say it through tears. I don't care
Mhm.
if you don't believe it when you say it, but say these things. Say, I am enough. I am worth it. I am okay, or whatever it is that they need some reassurance about. But yeah, I think it's, yeah, equally important to hear someone else say that to you, because too often, people don't hear that.
You've said some to me before. I know you've seen me, and we're going to talk about the details, but
Mm-hmm.
you've seen me when I was dealing with some really hard things, and you would look at me in the eye and say, Eric, just breathe.
Yeah.
Because I didn't notice I wasn't.
Yeah.
And I wrote it down. And I was like,
I think I sent you even a screenshot of a
Yep.
just breathe pillow. Like, look, just breathe.
And that was a mantra for me for a while. I was like, okay.
Yeah. Wow. Well, Eric, you have talked about, the gift that we can give someone else, which is to give affirmations to remind them of who they are. And not just who they are, but as Christ followers, reminding them who they are in Christ, right? That's a gift that we can give someone. But I wonder, what is the best gift that someone has given you?
My wife regularly gives me this gift, and what she gives me is patience. I can be kind of a flamey person. Sometimes I can get very passionate about things I believe in, especially social justice stuff, and it can sometimes be exhausting. And what my wife is good at is she invests long term in relationships with people. And she doesn't have a huge group of people, but she has a small group. And I'm one of those people, and she's just very patient with me. And that's been everything. That I get to be who I am. I'm good at being passionate about things, and sometimes being very intense or saying things that sometimes that need to be said out loud. My wife's gift is to not be real flappable, and she's just more even. And so she's able to give the gift of patience where maybe I give the gift of passion.
Okay.
And that's a nice pairing.
That is a very nice pairing. I am so glad you two found each other.
I am too.
Well, Eric, we are now just about ready to wrap up today's show, but I just want to say thank you so much for being our guest today. And could you just talk us through a little bit about how someone could get in touch with you? I know we have your contact information, but if you could just tell us, how could someone get in touch with you?
Yeah. There's 3 different places. I'm a therapist at Adolescent and Family Behavioral Health Services, which is a small Black-owned private practice in the Grand Rapids, Michigan area. There's a link here where you could send me an email through that. If you're curious about my artwork, there's a link here for my artist webpage. And if you want to find me on the Antioch podcast, you can send an email following the links on the website for the Antioch podcast, www.antiochpodcast.org.
Yes, you can even find a link to it on the Preach Sista website,
Yes.
because the Antioch podcast is a ministry of Preach Sista.
Yes.
We are so excited. So, Eric, it has been so fun having you on today's show. And I just want to say thank you for being brave enough to be the first male. It made it easier to invite the other males who will be on the show the rest of this season to say, well, yeah, we've had a male on the show, or we will be having a male on the show. So thank you so much for being this. And thank you for the work with the Antioch podcast. And thank you for allowing Preach Sista to come alongside to bring the Antioch podcast into the Preach Sista family. It helps us so very much to live more deeply into our education pillar of our ministry, because we really wanted to educate people more about social justice issues, but just didn't see how we would be able to do it. And the Antioch podcast has been the perfect solution for us. So I just want to say thank you so very much for being our guest on the show today. And so now we're getting ready to close ourselves out. So I'm just going to give you Eric's information one more time so that you can see that. Please reach out. And if you can't catch the screenshot or you don't remember the information, you can always email us at Preach Sista to get this information. But I also want to remind you all the different ways that you can connect with Preach Sista. You can connect with Preach Sista through our website, which is preachsista.org. We have that Instagram account. We promise we'll do a little bit better about posting pics and things on there. But we have 2 Facebook pages. You can find us at Preach Sista or at Refill with Preach Sista. So there's a little private community that's associated with this page that you can just join in, and we have daily inspirational thoughts that are posted on that page. We also have a YouTube channel, and you just might be watching this on YouTube, but we have a YouTube channel. Our Wild Bible Study is going to be focusing on spiritual disciplines in Season 2, which just launched last night. But it's not too late to join in the fun. We meet every first and third Sunday. We meet every first and third Friday of the month. And then, of course, there is our Sister Connections newsletter. It comes out regularly. I've landed on just saying it comes out regularly because, life happens. But I want to say thanks for joining us. Make sure to check out our various platforms. If you want to tag us at Refill with Preach Sista, or tag us with Official Preach Sista. Until next time, we invite you to keep growing in your faith and nourishing your soul. This has been Michelle Loyd-Paige and the Antioch Podcast and Refill with Preach Sista.